All right, welcome to the Ramble On. My name is Brendan,
And I'm Nick.
and we are going to tear apart this band of misfits.
Yeah, I would call it Watchmen Light,
Yeah,
but that seems like
Watchmen
an insult
Light.
to Watch. That seems like an insult to Watchmen.
No, like you said, it definitely draws influence from other comics like X-Men and Watchmen with the whole... I might even just reference it to Scooby-Doo, too, because that whole misfit gang of...
Oh, yeah, it very much draws inspiration from Watchmen, and it's clear from watching the show that they are fans of Watchmen. There's a couple of little references, things like the barbershop in one of the episodes is called the Night Owl, and when they look at the case fluff like the Apocalypse, it has the logo from the Watchmen on
That's
it.
right.
The comedians sing it. But yeah, the show is begging to be compared with the Watchmen, so I'm going to lead with that in this ramble on, because I feel like if we compare the show with Watchmen, it does not hold up at all. Straight up, does not hold up.
Now, I like the Watchmen. This,
But the difference is with the Watchmen, it was generally played very straight. We kept a consistent tone. We were doing
Yes.
interesting things with the panels. We did interesting things with the format of the comic book and the tropes of superheroes. And we had a deconstruction of all these heroes as they have to exist in the real world with actual people and actual consequences.
Whereas...
And this show tries to play with that. It tries to play with that idea of existing in the real world, but after a few episodes, it kind of loses track of being in the real world.
It does, and some of this can be traced back to the fault of the numerous writers it has backing it, because there are lots of filler parts or scenes in it that kind of pander to, like, oh, you saw a very depressing scene here, have this comic relief scene that'll help buck you up.
But I think the comic relief scenes always work against it, honestly. Because if we're looking at through the scope of The Watchmen, one of the critical things The Watchmen did to lighten scenes was to have dark humor. Like, typically a lot of the funniest moments in The Watchmen were gallows humor. Things like Rorschach having his moments, monologuing to himself or hiding in a fridge. You had you had the moment where Night Owl and... what is her name? Whatever her name is. I think I was talking about how they have this real dark comedy moments with a comedian where they're going through what kind of jokes he would tell at this moment and trying to honor him in that way. Whereas in this show, we get kind of slapsticky humor in place of dark humor, where it should be that. And the slapsticky humor doesn't really work. One particular moment where I really got lost from this show is episode 5. There's a moment in this show where Five and Luther are trying to organize this deal thing with the two time travel agents, Hazel and Cha-Cha.
Yeah.
They set up a meeting. They agreed to trade the briefcase for a meeting with the what's her face?
The handler?
Yeah, the handler. And then as they're having the meeting, an ice cream truck playing March Flight of the Valkyries.
Yeah.
Shows up, being driven by the two brothers who are having like this like crazy fun kind of Trailer Park Boys style thing, where they kind of crash into them and then make their getaway.
Yeah.
And it feels so slapsticky and bizarrely out of place for a show that just moments before that was having very serious discussions about how one brother is using drugs in order to cope with his problems with the dead, and how he's constantly being tormented by the ghosts of those around him.
And how the other brother, Diego, lost his girlfriend to the said hitmen, Cha-Cha and Hazel.
Yeah, like these are very serious things that they just talked about, and then they resolve them by having a slapsticky crash ice cream truck into someone thing that doesn't work. It does not work.
It kind of underplays the seriousness or tragedy of what those hitmen did to those two brothers.
It also destroys the emotional undercurrent of the scene. The slapstick stuff in the show does not work because there's essentially 3 plot lines that are running in this show. There's the Apocalypse plot line that's running, there's the getting the band back together, and there's the weird time travel shit in this show, which none of that fits. None of it fits or even really matters in the end.
I respectfully disagree because, okay,
No, look, I want you to imagine this series as if it was just Five goes to the future, sees the apocalypse, and manages to stumble upon a way to return to the past through his powers. What changes?
Yeah, good point. I mean, they're still in the dark about they're still in the dark
What
about what
changes?
Yeah, you didn't have to have Cha-Cha and Hazel, but they are
You lose an episode or two, that's about it.
they are in the comic books, which again, I haven't read. I only probably skimmed at best.
No. Like, I'm not just talking about, like, oh, you wouldn't have Hazel and Chuck. You wouldn't have the stupid pointless action scenes where they're fighting the goons from the timekeeper peoples.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have the pointless scenes where Five talks to the handler. And you wouldn't have the scenes where Hazel and Cha-Cha have disagreements over a woman.
Yeah. Or you wouldn't have the scenes
And-
where Five becomes a hitman for this said organization.
Yeah, he would just be someone that went through the apocalypse and had to come back after coping with survival, which
Right.
would still fit his character.
Yeah.
In other words, nothing of value would be lost.
Not especially. But I mean, you had to have an evil organization.
Well, no,
and
you
this was
didn't.
strangely it.
No, you didn't have to have one. It made no difference because the plot was all about how one of their sisters was underappreciated and had a dangerous power that she didn't know how to control due to an abusive father. That would have been a fascinating angle to approach it from. Instead of having like the slapsticky weird stuff with the time travel agency, just cut it. Just cut it.
So what else were we talking about? We took the time. Yeah, the other two plots. So yeah, the world coming to an end thing. That's fine. And there was what was the other plot?
It's boring. It's a boring plot though.
Oh, getting the band back together. That was.
That's the heart of the show, is getting them back together and reconciliating.
Right, because it does kind of show each character's emotional baggage that they still carry, and
Like, the whole premise of the show is these emotionally scarred people who went through a failed attempt to create the X-Men coming together as adults and coming to cope with their past and their problems. Which, that's great. I love that kind of bonding, that character connection stuff. That's what made The Watchmen amazing, is
Right.
that. The Apocalypse stuff is kind of boring and expected. Like, it's a very Jean Grey-esque plot line from X-Men, where you just have one mutant who is, like, way not in control of her powers and threatens everything. It's such a bland, expected plot line.
but yeah, getting the band back together, and then, well, yeah, the whole time agency that could have been avoided, and then
Just cut it out.
Yeah, just cut it out.
We didn't need that.
The whole apocalypse thing. I mean, yeah, it is revealed that Ellen Page's character, Vanya,
Yeah, Vanya.
it's revealed that she's the bomb that blows up the planet. But
I mean, it's revealed, like, maybe 4 or 5 episodes back when he's, like, taking a close one. It's like, oh, it's going to be a thing about how her powers have been suppressed and she can't control them.
right,
Like, you saw it coming a mile away.
they heavily telegraph it. I mean, it's apparent.
There are elements of the show I did like in the first half, I would say, which is things like foreshadowing the relationship between Allison and Luther, foreshadowing how Luther's mission on the moon was completely pointless.
Right.
Yeah, just a lot of things where, like, there's some foreshadowing that was going on that I liked, but a lot of it didn't like. I like Klaus's character a lot.
Oh,
general.
yeah.
He had an interesting character and an interesting arc to him, which is his need to be sober if he wants to talk to the dead, but talking to the dead being inherently terrifying.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, he has very good dialogue. He has very funny quips, and his backstory is pretty well written. Because I mean,
And he's another progressive homosexual character.
Yeah.
It doesn't define him. There's even a great moment where Diego and him are talking in an episode that's non-canon. Thanks for including an episode that doesn't fucking happen. There's a great moment in that episode where it's him and Diego are having a talk, and Diego says, "So who was she?" And then he corrects him with him, and it doesn't end up being a thing that defines him as a character. It's just a thing that defines what happened to him. I like that a lot.
although my one complaint about Dave, the love interest of Klaus,
He's pointless.
why the fuck was he in the '60s? Why was he in Vietnam? Or
Because he got recruited to Vietnam. That's why Dave was in the 60s. Why was Klaus in the 50s? I have no fucking idea why that was important.
that's a better question. Yeah.
I think the only point was to destroy the suitcase from the pointless time traveling plot line, which just get rid of the time traveling.
That could have gotten destroyed in a crossfire with a hail of bullets. I mean, it's a huge lumbering time machine.
My
box.
suspicion is there was probably a whole chunk of the comics, like probably 3 comics or 4 comics, that detailed his time in the war and had him really build up as someone who lost his reliance on drugs and came to rely on someone else as an anchor that was completely lost in the show.
That is true. I mean, I
That's
would
my
be,
suspicion. I don't know if that's fact. I just suspect that.
I wouldn't put it past a Dark Horse comic series from the 90s. Because, I mean, we got Tank Girl, we got the Umbrella Academy, all these trippy-esque comics that have their own unique,
Kind of a hippie message to him by and large.
hippie message to them by and large. I mean, they're just, yeah. Hard to follow, esque. Kind of like, no, it's kind of like an Alice in Wonderland trip.
Sort of. This was not that tricky though. It was a very straightforward, boring plot.
The series was. I'm not sure about the comic.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe the comic was different. Yeah, I think that's the big thing. That was a lot of the characters were kind of wasted, and a lot of the potential of the series was wasted because it was just a lot of focusing on like this big dumb action plot that was happening, and not the interactions of the characters, which is basically the entire appeal of the show, which we didn't really get much of.
No. More time could have been allotted to it.
I think that if I'm talking about the show and what parts I did like, everything in episode 5 I liked a lot. It was a lot of resolving character issues, having a lot of dialogue heavy scenes, them living out their final days and seeing where they're going and resolving some things. And then 5 does his stupid time travel shit and fucks it all up.
He does, yeah, some kind of weird quantum reset.
Well, not weird quantum. He just travels back in time and creates a new timeline. But I think that it says something when the episode I like the absolute most is the one that doesn't even happen in the show.
Yeah. Yeah, they just kind of said, screw you, and then just time traveled back.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that in the comics it was, again, like a one-off comic where it's like, the day that never happened. You know, the comics did that thing a lot back in the day.
Yeah, they did.
And that's part of the comic booky problem is, like, if you're going to have an episode in your show where it doesn't even matter, why have it? It's just there for fan wink. It's nothing else.
Yeah. Which kind of brings us back to a topic we introduced in the American Recut. Comic books into TV shows. Could work, but I mean...
I think that when you do an adaptation of comic books into any form of media for mass consumption, you need to ditch the comic book part. Like, there's a lot of tropes and stupidity in comic books that's accepted because it's a comic book and there's a history of it. But when you adapt it to a TV show or a movie, you need to ditch the comic book. Because I think that's a problem that we're seeing in Marvel movies. There's a lot more of the really stupid parts of comic books are being brought in. Because I think they're just getting kind of lazy with it and saying, fuck it, just adapt it word for word, who cares?
Right.
Because in things like the early Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, they were very careful to make sure that was like palatable to audiences en masse. There was a lot of stuff that was cut out and a lot of stuff that was streamlined to make sure that like audiences didn't say, what the fuck is going on?
Right. No, I mean, the Umbrella Academy, I'm sure it's a good concept and it looks like a good story, but like you said, because they kept trying to bring some of the comic book tropes into this series.
I feel like it would be a good concept if like Watchmen didn't exist.
Yeah.
And if some of the later arcs of X-Men didn't exist, or if Logan didn't exist. Because Logan is very much this show, but done well.
Yeah.
Logan, the Fox movie.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. We do reference a lot of other series as a kind of a compare and contrast. And we do need to do that because...
Well, yeah, because the show begs us to do it. It
right.
includes so many references that you can't miss it.
It establishes a standard.
It's not fair to compare it to that one. Well, it's a concept that's been done before and done better. I'm going to look at other examples of it if I'm going to compare it to that.
Right, because there are... like we said, this series draws influence from other comics, X-Men, Watchmen, etc., etc.
Batman, arguably, for some of the more interesting arcs, like what is that one called? Flashpoint, like the Flashpoint arc, where you have Bruce's parents become Joker and Batman. Which you have some interesting stuff where you have the real world meets superheroes. There's some interesting arcs here and there. This isn't one of them though, because it just loses that focus on the real world. That's the whole draw and appeal of it.
Right. No, that's what I was kind of thinking in episode 2. Like, Reginald Hargreaves is like a geriatric Bruce Wayne, except meaner and more insane.
Oh, he's horrible. He is kind of a mixture of Bruce Wayne and. Oh, by the way, speaking of Reginald, can we talk about the batshit opening of the final episode?
Let's. What the fuck was up with that?
So, in the final episode, if you've forgotten about it or are just spoiling yourself on this, it opens with Reginald and some lady who's on her deathbed, and she's talking about how the planet's going to die, but Reginald doesn't have to. And then like a bunch of rockets take off in the background, and he releases like a magic space dust or something into the air, and like they're in like some sort of a Kryptonian sort of location. And my thought is, what the fuck is going on?
I know. Are we on Krypton now? What is this? And first he's on Krypton or some kind of magical moon planet.
I don't think really any explanation for why he has the monkey butler.
No, they do leave the. I feel like they do neglect certain parts of the comic book story.
I mean, Pogo in general, he just exists to be exposition and then gets killed off. But,
Pogo.
Oh no, not my dictionary.
The little Morgan Freeman.
If Morgan Freeman still took good roles.
Yeah. The monkey solely existed for exposition. I mean, there was no real charm or, well...
There was some charm to him, but he didn't do anything but dump exposition.
I mean, who doesn't want a monkey butler? I would love a monkey butler.
Well, I mean, that seems like it's racist, but I'm not sure.
Oh, come on. Well, no.
Speciesist?
I mean, I'd pay him. I'd give him a wage.
Well, better than Reginald.
Probably.
Bastard.
No kidding. There was a weird pet owner mentality there.
I feel like the show kind of liked to mention, like, I did a bad thing, and then show the characters wallowing in their despair about having done the bad thing. But they never actually showed us the bad things for the most part. There is one good moment in, I want to say, episode 8, where it opens with Alyssa talking to her daughter and telling her a story, then using her power, the I heard a rumor power, in order to get her to go to bed. Then we kind of hear all the time she's used it, and it ends on this very poignant, I heard a rumor that you love me, which is fantastic. And I wanted a lot more of that kind of thing, where we see the demons that haunt them from their past, and the things that they have done.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see what they did, not just hear them talk about, I did a bad thing, and now I'm sad.
I want more insight into the ghosts that haunt Klaus, because, I mean, in the first few episodes, we see the same...
We get one episode with Klaus. I think it's episode 5, or no, it's 4. It's episode 4, where we do see him like talk to a bunch of ghosts and like get some information out of them, and then he never really does that again.
No, which is a darn shame, really.
And I feel like it's kind of an insult to Klaus's character that his greatest moment of triumph is when he finds out that he can make the spirits corporeal to some extent, but he just does it to use Ben's power.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have like an army of ghosts that kick the shit out of all the guards. He doesn't have some awesome moment where he just has a ton of ghosts show up to fight people. He just kind of makes one guy, one brother of theirs who died, just do his thing.
Which, yeah, we're never really enlightened as to how he died. I think they want to save that for another season if they get that. But
I suspect it's just he got killed by his own powers because he's got some horrible space demon inside of his chest or something.
Yeah, that. It's they do seem to leave out a whole lot of important backstories that really should have been elaborated on. Instead, we're just treated to Hazel's infatuation with Donut Lady, where
we get a lot of what is her name? Mabel, Hamlet, Hazelnut,
Cha-Cha?
No. We'll edit this into the proper name in a sec. Vanya. Okay, edit out all the stuff where I was guessing at names. We got a lot of Vanya having like fun with her boyfriend stuff, which ultimately he just gets killed off after awakening her power, so he's pointless.
Yeah, no, and no, he made a bonehead move. He knew she had these powers. He poked the bear and made him into a shish kebab.
Yeah, he dies pointlessly. Like, the way he dies too is one that very much kind of screams fan wink, where he dies for the sake of the audience because we want to see him die, which is not how you should go about things. You don't kill a character because the audience doesn't like him.
Right, that's just pandering at that point.
That's just pandering. Yeah, I would say my overall opinion of the show, including spoilers, is that it starts off on the right foot with kind of this superheroes in the real world idea, and then it kind of peters out as it gets too far up its own ass with its lore that it establishes.
Right.
And it kind of starts to buy into its own hype.
It does. No,
And in the end, that hype is kind of the opposite of what was the appeal of it, and you'll lose what made it special.
conceptually a great idea, but if they left out some of the comic tropes and if they stuck with one or two writers, then it could have been a pretty good series.
I agree. I think that having just a consistent lead writer and a consistent director who made sure the tone was consistent across all the episodes would have done wonders. Because the episodes that were way too corny and off the wall cheesy, like, look at how zany these brothers are, kind of episodes,
It warps
hurt
the
show
tone.
a lot. They hurt the show a lot. So now that we've had a long conversation about this, would you recommend this? Simple yes or no?
Meh. Nah. You're not missing much.
Agreed. For my own taste, I say no.
All right. And this has been the Ramble On. My name is Brendan.
We've talked this movie to death. It's because not a movie, it's a TV show. We talked it to death. We did it. I'm Nick.